On his 64th birthday, he received an unexpected gift, a bottle of premium liquor with a note that contained only 2 words, "Happy Birthday." The sender was none other than his only son, the one who had cut off contact for 3 years. It seemed like a sign of reconciliation, but only a few days later, the neighbor, who was also his son's father-in-law, collapsed because of that very bottle. Public opinion in Springfield erupted, everyone pointing fingers. That school teacher poisoned him. And even worse, the son did not defend him, but stood before the court and coldly declared, "My father has lost control. He is a dangerous man who must be removed." From a respected teacher, Thomas Dalton turned into a demon in the eyes of the community, driven into death by his own flesh and blood through a perfect plan, poisoning, spreading rumors, slandering before the public, and then seizing all the property. This is a true story about the ultimate betrayal, about how a father was torn apart in dignity and pushed into hell within his very own family. The story will be a breathless journey. Every deceit, every downfall, every vicious scheme, until the truth is revealed. Get ready, because this is not just a family story. It is a betrayal that shook an entire community. Before I continue my story, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are listening from in the comments. I am deeply grateful, and now I will continue telling my story. The day I turned 64, Springfield, Missouri, was covered in a chilly autumn morning, the wind from the Ozark River blowing through the trees on Sunshine Avenue, rustling like an old song. The house I had lived in for more than 30 years still carried the loneliness left after my wife passed away. The wooden kitchen table usually held only a cup of black coffee and a piece of dry bread. Yet today, outside the door, a gift lay neatly on the porch. No greeting card, no sender's name, just a long box, heavy enough that my old hands trembled when lifting it. Gray wrapping paper, loosely tied with a small rope, gave off something both elegant and cold. I carried it inside, set it on the table, and used a small knife to cut open the wrapping. On the inside was a bottle of whiskey, a limited edition I knew cost at least $1,000, with a deep blue label inlaid with shining gold letters. But what made my heart stop was not the bottle, but the note attached to the box containing only 2 words, "Happy Birthday." The handwriting was sharp, familiar, so much so that my hands shook not because of age, but because of the memories rushing back. It was the handwriting of Michael, my only son, whom I had raised for more than 20 years. For 3 years we had not seen each other. Life split like 2 rail tracks. I went one way, he went another, until even meeting became foreign. I sat motionless, staring at the bottle. Images suddenly poured in. Those evenings when Linda, my wife, was still alive. She would pour me a small glass after dinner, and I would sip slowly, listening to the insects outside mix with the radio. Whiskey was something I once loved, not to get drunk, but to remind myself that life was still warm. But it all stopped after the heart attack 5 years ago. The doctor at Mercy Hospital in Springfield sternly told me, "If you want to live past 70, not a single drop of alcohol must touch your lips." Michael was in the room that day, sitting silently beside me. I thought he had carved it into memory, but it seemed those warnings had never existed in his mind. I did not open the bottle. I only watched the sunlight through the curtains shine on the glass, making the amber liquid inside sparkle like fire. A question rose in my mind. Why, after 3 years of silence, did Michael choose today to send such an expensive gift and exactly the one thing I could not drink? Had he forgotten? Or was this some message I had yet to grasp? My chest felt heavy, not joy, but as if an invisible stone pressed down. That afternoon I drove my old Chevy along the familiar road to the outskirts of Springfield, toward the farm of Henry Carson. Henry, Michael's father-in-law, was an old neighbor, also a friend who had often helped me repair the roof after storms, or clear the yard when my back ached. I thought if anyone deserved such a fine bottle, it was him. On the high hill, Henry's white wooden house appeared in the golden autumn sunlight, the wind carrying smoke from fireplaces across the valley. I stepped onto the porch. Henry, wearing a red plaid shirt and shoes still dusty with sawdust, opened the door with a smile. When I handed him the bottle, he looked at the label and whistled. "Lord Frank, this is something to save for a special occasion." I smiled. "Then let's call today special?" He laughed loudly, clapping my shoulder. For the first time in months, I felt I had done something good. Back home, I still thought about Michael. When he was little, I used to take him to Nathaniel Green Park, teach him to throw baseballs, and cheer when he scored his first run in the Springfield Cardinals Youth League. I once believed our father-son bond was unbreakable like steel, but as he grew older, Michael changed. He called me stubborn, rigid, and unwilling to sell the ancestral land to invest as he wanted. Slowly, distance turned into estrangement. This birthday, I thought no one would remember. Yet my very son sent me a bottle of liquor with 2 empty words. That night, while cleaning the kitchen, the phone rang. On the screen appeared a name I thought I would never see again. Michael. His voice came through, smooth but tense. "Dad, did you get the gift?" I answered briefly. "Yes." A long pause, then he asked, "Did you drink it?" I told the truth. I didn't drink. I gave it to Henry Carson. On the other end, silence, only heavy breathing. "You gave it to Henry?" His voice sank. Then the line went dead. I held the receiver, a chill crawling up my spine. Why did he care so much about who drank that bottle? Why did I feel there was something dark hidden in that gift? Springfield outside remained as peaceful as ever, but inside my small house, the shadows grew thicker than ever. The night in Springfield sank into fog. The streetlights on Sunshine Avenue blurred like candle streaks in an old church. I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Michael's question, "Dad, did you drink it?" echoing in my head like an equation without a solution. As a teacher who had spent a lifetime in the classroom, I once told my students that every equation had an answer. Every problem could be solved, if one was patient enough to find the rule. But with that question, the more I thought, the more I shuddered. Because in Michael's voice there was no concern of a son asking about his father, but the whisper of someone watching a trap. I looked up at the ceiling, the small cracks spreading like a map of my life. 25 years of teaching at Springfield High, educating thousands of students, some later becoming doctors, engineers, even returning to teach at the same school. But when night fell, I realized that even though I had sown knowledge into generations of students, I was powerless before my own son, the bond of family severed beyond repair. Around midnight, the landline rang, the shrill sound shattering the silence. I grabbed the receiver, heart racing. On the other end was a woman's trembling, hoarse voice, as if she had just been crying. "Thomas, this is Rosa." Henry collapsed at dinner. We're at St. John's Hospital. It was as if all the air was sucked out of my lungs. "Collapsed? What do you mean?" Rosa sobbed. "The doctor said there are signs of poisoning. Henry just drank the bottle of liquor you brought this afternoon. He praised its taste, poured the second glass, and then fell over the table." I dropped the receiver, hearing it strike the tile floor while my head spun. Images of Henry flashed in my mind, his gentle smile, the strong hands gripping a hammer while fixing my roof, now turned into a man unconscious in a hospital bed because of a gift that came from my own hands. I clutched the edge of the table, guilt flooding through me as though I had pushed my friend into death. I threw on my coat and drove into the night. The streets of Springfield were quiet, only a few diners still lit, the smoke of barbecue pits drifting through the cracked window. My old Chevy roared down the road, headlights piercing the mist. At St. John's Hospital, I saw Rosa slumped outside the emergency room, face pale, hands clutching her head. A doctor emerged, voice heavy. "Mr. Carson is being kept in critical condition. We suspect alkaloid toxins in his blood. Luckily, he was brought in quickly a few minutes later, and it would have been too late. My soul felt as if it had left my body. One word rang in my head: white snakeroot. I had once read about it in scientific documents while preparing a biology lesson for 12th grade, a wild plant that caused many farmers' deaths in the 19th century. That name now echoed like a curse. I stood frozen, remembering Michael's silence when I said I had given the liquor to Henry. That heavy silence now became clearer proof than any confession. At about 2 in the morning, I returned home. The kitchen was pitch dark, only the glow of the streetlight through the window, painting broken patches across the floor. I poured a glass of water, but my hand shook so violently that it spilled over the table. In the darkness, I saw the old classroom photo on the shelf, a generation of students smiling brightly, standing around me, the confident teacher who once taught that truth would always defeat lies. Yet now I wondered if I could withstand lies born from my own blood. I sat down, head bowed, recalling each detail: the handwriting on the note, the question over the phone, the heavy breathing when he heard, "I gave the liquor to Henry," all strung together into a script that made my skin crawl. At 4 in the morning, the phone shrilled again in the dark house. I jolted, heart pounding out of my chest. The screen showed only 2 words: Michael. I hesitated, then picked up. His voice came low, strained. "Dad, how is he?" I answered quickly, forcing calm. "Henry is still in the hospital. The doctor said there are toxins in the liquor." A pause, then a burst of dry laughter, metallic and chilling. In the dead of night, that laugh sent shivers down my spine. "Do you know, that bottle was meant for you? You cleverly passed it to Henry, but do you think you can escape? Who will Springfield believe? A teacher angry over land, or a son just trying to protect his family?" I trembled, forcing words through clenched teeth. "Why? Why would you want to kill your own father?" Michael's voice exploded like a scream, tearing through the night. "Because I need money? Do you understand? I need a lot of money. Years ago, I begged you to mortgage the land for business capital, but you refused. You said you feared risks. You feared losing the ancestral land. So what? You clung to it for what? That land is worth $300,000 or $400,000 now, while I'm drowning in debt from failed investments in St. Louis. Banks press me. Creditors press me. Emily threatens to leave. Yet I need money at all costs. And you are the living safe standing in my way." I was choked, clutching the receiver, struggling to contain the trembling. "I'll call the police. You just confessed." Michael laughed loudly, dripping with contempt. "Call them. But who will believe you? An old man of 64 with heart disease, insomnia, failing memory, and a town convinced you resented Henry. They will believe me, the successful businessman, the decent husband, over a bitter old man inventing lies to escape blame. What proof do you have? None. And without proof, you are nothing." The phone clicked off, leaving only the cold beeping tone. I collapsed into the chair, the receiver slipping from my hand. In the silence, his words still slashed like knives. "That bottle was meant for you." My chest tightened, heart pounding wildly, torn between rage and despair. I had once taught my students that truth would prevail over lies, but tonight I faced a brutal truth. Without evidence, I could do nothing. Outside, Springfield slowly brightened, the sky blushing with dawn, but within me, darkness thickened, and I knew the real nightmare had only just begun. After that midnight call, I sat numbly in the cold kitchen, yellow light from the worn bulb casting long stains on the wooden table. I could not sleep. Instead of Michael's words, memories played like an old film someone had switched on. The image of little Michael came alive in perfect detail. The day he was born at Cox South Hospital in Springfield, I stood in the hallway with my heart racing, anxious yet elated. Linda, my wife, placed him in my arms, her face glowing like sunrise, and I held the tiny being trembling, vowing to raise him into a decent man. I thought it was the greatest mission of my life, not only a teacher in class, but a father guiding his only son. Hard days stretched on. When Michael was 3, Linda was gravely ill, and I taught at Springfield High by day, tutored at night to pay for her medicine. Many nights I returned home late, hallway lights off, finding Michael waiting in the dark just to be hugged. The boy had bright eyes, and whenever he saw me, he smiled. "Dad, you're home." That simple line kept me from collapsing. I remembered winter mornings in the Ozarks, cold biting as I carried him on my back across thin ice to preschool, his breath warming my neck, his tiny hands clutching my collar. In grade school, he loved books, and I often took him to the public library on Central Street, pointing out novels and science texts. At night, I explained the basics of the world, believing knowledge would be his shield. I once sacrificed everything for him. When he was 14, the Springfield Cardinals hosted a youth baseball tournament, and Michael desperately wanted to join, but he couldn't afford good gloves. Quietly, I sold the old radio so Linda could buy him a pair. The day he scored his first run, running to the stands to show me, his eyes shone, and my heart glowed as if warmed by fire. I thought that moment proved our bond, proved my sacrifices were worth it. I remembered the nights he burned with fever, me beside him changing cold towels, eyes raw with exhaustion yet whispering, "I'm here. You'll be fine." And indeed he recovered, even joking the next morning, "Dad, you're the best doctor I ever had." As he grew older, my hopes grew. I wanted him to study diligently, to be useful. I had taught thousands, but with him I was both father and teacher. Each line on the board also a message for him. Linda often warned me not to be too strict, that love was more than rules, but I believed discipline built character. Perhaps that was where the crack began. Michael resisted, saying I was imposing, that I didn't understand him. The day he chose to study finance in St. Louis, leaving behind small Springfield, I stayed silent. I didn't stop him, but inside I was torn apart, knowing he would belong to another world, where ambition and profit could devour the honest lessons I had once taught. For so many years I still believed that deep inside him remained the same child who once ran into his father's arms at the sound of the door opening. I still kept his old baseball glove on the bookshelf as a symbol of the bond we once had. But that phone call, his dry laugh when he said, "That bottle was meant for you," it was like a hammer shattering that fragile belief. All the years I poured into raising him, all the sleepless nights for his sake, in the end turned into betrayal, even a plot to take my life. That feeling was more painful than any illness, more terrifying than the heart attack that nearly killed me. I sat in the kitchen, my hands clenched white. The image of a devoted teacher, a sacrificing father, was now twisted into a naive man pushed into the abyss by his own blood. Outside Springfield was quiet, but inside my heart, the years of beauty had collapsed, leaving only bitterness, a lifetime of nurturing, and this was the return. The news of Henry Carson collapsing at dinner spread through Springfield faster than any wind from the Ozarks. The next morning, before I could recover, groups of people were already gathered at the corner cafe, buzzing. In a small town, no secret stays long, and once the story left the hospital walls, it became a wave of rumor no one could stop. Stepping onto my porch, I heard the whispers from 2 women across the street. Martha Jenkins, a widow, 3 houses down, was saying, "Didn't Thomas argue with Henry about that land at the edge of the farm? Now Henry collapses after drinking the very bottle Thomas brought. What more proof do you need?" I turned away, pretending not to hear, but each word pierced me like a needle. In Springfield, I had once been respected. Students called me Mr. Thomas. Parents shook my hand at meetings, saying, "You changed my child's life." I once believed a teacher's honor was a shield, but now, overnight, every glance toward me had changed. That afternoon, I went to the public library, where I usually read the paper each week. A few old colleagues nodded, but their eyes slid away. I caught the low words behind me. Who would have thought a teacher could do that? No one accused me directly, but the avoidance was sharp, as if I carried a plague. Worse was Rosa Carson's arrival. She came to my home that afternoon, face swollen from tears. As soon as she saw me, her trembling hand pointed straight. "Thomas, what did you do to Henry? He is lying unconscious. The doctor says it is poisoning. And who gave him that bottle if not you?" I stammered that it was only a gift passed on from Michael, that I had no idea what was inside. But Rosa refused to listen. She cried out on my porch, "You still resent the land dispute. You still hate our family. Now you hurt Henry for revenge." Neighbors gathered, eyes fixed, voices buzzing. I stood frozen, feeling the bricks of my reputation crumble beneath me. Days later, while Henry remained in critical condition, rumors spread through the old school where I had taught. A former student met me on the street, eyes caught between doubt and pity, whispering, "Teacher, I don't believe what they say, but—" Then he trailed off and walked away. That but cut deeper than a knife. It spoke for the suspicion seeping into every corner of town. I remembered telling my students long ago, rumors spread faster than truth. Learn to tell fact from fabrication. Yet now I was the living proof of that lesson. Little Springfield became an invisible courtroom, where every glance, every whisper was a verdict. I heard that some men at the bar said, "Thomas was always jealous of Henry. One was a poor teacher, the other had land and a farm. There's the motive." Their words, without proof, were treated as fact. At night I sat in the dim living room, the yellow lamp shining on old lesson plans. I saw a student's handwriting. "You taught us to live honestly," and my heart twisted. I had once stood tall, telling hundreds of students that justice prevails. But now those same people looked at me with suspicion. The pain was no less than Michael's laughter in my face. In the days that followed, I was no longer Thomas, but the teacher who poisoned his in-law in Springfield's tale. Neighbors avoided my eyes, and some parents warned their children away. One day I heard children outside my gate calling, "Don't go near that house. It's dangerous. He puts poison in drinks." I sat behind the curtain, hands clenching white. A lifetime teaching words, now turned into a man accused of spreading poison. Worst of all, I realized Michael, my own blood, was the one fanning the rumor. Not openly, but with every shrug, every hint, he pushed suspicion onto me. Springfield needed no hard proof, only a story that seemed plausible. And so rumor rose, painting me a demon in the eyes of those who once called me teacher. That night, sitting silently on the porch, the wind cold from the Ozarks, I understood. Some wounds do not come from knives or guns, but from the gaze of a community, and those wounds can cut deeper than death. 2 days after Henry Carson was hospitalized, Springfield had no other topic but the whiskey. Whenever I stepped outside, eyes stabbed into my back like pins. I had grown used to whispers, but never imagined the Carson family, once kin, would publicly turn. That afternoon, Rosa came again, dressed in black, eyes swollen, voice hoarse from crying. She came not for comfort, but like someone seeking justice. The moment I opened the door, she pointed at me, trembling with rage. "Thomas, you gave Henry that bottle." "Do you still deny it?" I faltered, trying to explain. "Rosa, listen to me. That bottle was not mine. It was a gift from Michael. I only thought Henry would like it. Rosa cut me off with a scream. "Don't lie. Everyone in Springfield knows you and Henry fought over the borderland. You always saw him as a thorn. Now he collapses from your gift. Who would believe you're innocent?" Her words tolled like a funeral bell, pulling neighbors to my porch. Martha Jenkins at the fence nodded. "I told you, old grudges always find a way." Some old men nearby stared at me with suspicion, even satisfaction, as if the scandal confirmed what they wanted all along. I stepped back, heart pounding, body numb. A lifetime of teaching, I had believed truth would clear all. But in that moment, I knew truth was losing to rumor's flood. Rosa's accusations carried not only logic, but the grief of a wife. She screamed before the crowd, "Henry lies in the hospital. The doctor says his chances are 50%. If he dies, Thomas, I swear before God, I will call you a murderer." Her voice split the calm Springfield sky, placing me at the defendant's stand on my own porch. Around me I heard the murmurs, each word sharp. What a cruel teacher! He taught generations but harmed his own in-laws, a hypocrite hiding behind education. Each phrase cut deep like knives. That night, I did not dare go outside. I sat in the living room, the desk lamp casting light over unfinished lesson plans. Tomorrow I would still have to go to school, still have to walk into class as a teacher, but in my mind I imagined the eyes of students and parents after reading the rumors. For a teacher, what could be more cruel than the children he had raised? Whispering, "Our teacher poisoned someone." I held my head, gasping, wondering if I had the strength to stand against an entire town, united in accusation. Late that night, Michael called again. His voice was no longer urgent, but cold and steady. "Do you see? They believe now. Denying is useless. The bottle came from your hand. You are the one with motive. Springfield will never take your side." I trembled and hung up, cold sweat soaking my shirt. His words were like a sentence already passed. I once thought teaching students about truth was the hardest lesson, but now I know. The hardest was facing lies sown by my own son. The next day, when I arrived at school, the hallway that was usually noisy fell silent as I entered. Colleagues avoided me. Students whispered. The principal called me into his office, voice heavy. "Thomas, perhaps you should take a few weeks off." The school cannot withstand this public pressure. I nodded, too weary to argue. Leaving the school, I felt erased from the only world that had sustained me since Linda's death. That afternoon, passing the farmer's market in downtown Springfield, a stranger shot me a look of contempt and spat the words, "The teacher poisoner." I stood frozen, heart clenched, a lifetime building the image of a model teacher, now erased by Rosa's accusations and neighbors' gossip. I suddenly understood. Nothing is more fragile than honor, built over a lifetime, destroyed in a single night. When night fell, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the wind through the roof, heart heavy. I had lost Linda, lost Michael's trust, and now the trust of the in-laws. Rosa, who once called me brother, now stood with the crowd, accusing me of harming her husband. I felt pushed to the edge of a cliff, behind me only darkness, and I knew the nightmare was not over. In the days that followed, Springfield became a giant cage, and I was the bird torn by crows. Everywhere I went, I heard whispers, saw stares. I lived quietly in a house full of old books, waking from nightmares every night. But in the middle of despair, a small detail changed everything. On Wednesday evening, cleaning the kitchen, I found in the trash a small glass vial, unlabeled, with traces of fine white powder, like ash. I vaguely remembered it had been packed together with the whiskey when I opened the birthday gift, but I had thought it was just a desiccant packet and ignored it. Now, seeing the powder glint under the light, fear rose in me. As a teacher of basic biology, I knew some white powders were not sugar or salt, but death itself. What I needed was proof, or at least a lead. Otherwise, no one would believe me. I thought of Gary McConnell, a former chemistry teacher at Springfield High. He once ran the lab, so meticulous that students called him Gary Microscope. The next morning I brought the vial to his house. He looked at me, hesitation in his eyes from the rumors, but still opened the door. "Let me see, Thomas." He took tweezers and a magnifier, then told me to come back in the afternoon. When I returned, his face was grave. "Thomas, sit down." I ran a few quick tests. This powder contains toxins from white snakeroot. This plant once caused milk sickness in the 19th century, killing many Midwestern farmers. Even a small amount can trigger fatal heart failure. I froze, heart stopping. It was clear now. The whiskey Henry drank contained poison, but who put it there, and why had it landed in my hands? In turmoil, I recalled every detail. The whiskey came in Michael's gift, from no one else. He called right after, pressing if I had drunk it. When he learned Henry had, his tone shifted. Now this vial with white snake root appeared from the same package. The chain was connecting, only missing financial proof. I decided I could not sit idle while rumors buried me. I began probing old connections. One evening at a gas station, I ran into Eric, Michael's high school friend. He tried to avoid me, but I blocked him, sternly like when I once caught a student cheating. "Eric, if you know anything, speak. This is life and death." Eric trembled, then muttered, "I don't want trouble." But Michael asked me to connect him to a guy named Trevor Miller, who deals in strange chemicals. I heard Michael paid more than $10,000. I stiffened, cold all over. Eric added, "I remember Michael asked about dosage. Miller told him enough to make a man with a weak heart not survive." That line cut the air like a blade. That night, I could not sleep. I racked my memory about Trevor Miller, a shady name once on the Springfield Police Watch lists for selling illegal substances on the black market. If Michael had dealt with him, then the truth was undeniable. My son had spent $12,000 on formulas and toxins, disguised as a birthday gift for me. Fate twisted cruelly as I passed the bottle to Henry, turning him into the substitute victim. I sat in the living room, lamplight over old student notebooks. My heart boiled with fury and sorrow. I had taught students to know right from wrong, taught that greed and lies destroy lives. Yet my own son, the one I raised with sweat and sacrifice, had walked the path of crime. I remembered rainy days when I covered him with my coat while soaking myself, winter mornings when I packed egg sandwiches for him, nights I stayed awake grading papers while he slept peacefully. Those memories struck my heart, deepening the pain as I realized he was the one who set the trap to kill me. But as a teacher, I knew every problem requires evidence. I could not just sit here lamenting. I needed proof of the money, the deal with Trevor Miller, and the poison vial. Only then could I clear my name of the label of guilt stamped on me. Springfield might turn away, Rosa might accuse, neighbors might sneer, but truth cannot stay buried forever. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, I saw a faint glimmer of light in the darkness. It was hope, the hope that there was still a path to prove the truth, even if that path was filled with danger. And I knew the journey had only just begun. Springfield had always been a small town, where stories usually ended at the picket fence, the corner diner, or the farmer's market. But in this era, a single line on social media could ignite the whole community like fire. I did not know when Michael had begun his calculations, only that one morning I woke to pounding on the door. It was Gary, an old colleague. He handed me his phone, the screen showing Michael's post. "It breaks my heart that my father is involved in Henry Carson's death. I once hoped he would change, but I was wrong." Below it, hundreds of comments flooded in. "If even the Sun says so, he must be guilty. A respectable teacher, nothing but a hidden murderer. What are Springfield's children learning from him?" My head spun, my hands shook with rage. With a few words, Michael had done what whispers on the street could not, stamped guilt permanently on my name. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen, the glass vial of white powder in front of me. I stared at it, with only one thought. I had to trace the truth. I could not let a lifetime of teaching, of students, of lesson plans, be crushed by my son's lies. The only lead I had was the name Trevor Miller and the sum of $12,000 Eric had revealed. I knew Trevor belonged to a world far from mine, a shadow lurking in seedy bars, alleys no decent Springfield citizen would enter. But if I did not step into that world, I would never prove my innocence. Late at night, I drove to the northern outskirts, to a bar called the Rusty Nail, the place Eric had mentioned. Its wooden door sagged, and neon lights flickered. The stench of cheap liquor, cigarette smoke, and sweat filled the air. I sat in a corner watching. A bearded man in a tattered leather jacket entered. They called him Trevor. My fists clenched. My heart raced. I had lived my life with chalk and blackboards, never stepping into this darkness. But Trevor's cold eyes, the way he handed small packets to a young man and pocketed thick bills, told me this was the man I needed. I could not confront him directly. I left the bar but waited in my car, following when he stepped out. He drove an old pickup winding through narrow streets before stopping at a crooked wooden house. I memorized the address, heart pounding. Back home, I wrote everything down: place, time, Trevor's appearance. A retired teacher could not fight criminals, but every detail could be a weapon. The next day, I pressed Eric again. He hesitated, then admitted. Michael told me he wired Trevor $12,000 for formulas and dosages. He even bragged that now his father was no longer a problem. Cold fire burned in me. $12,000. A clear figure. If I found financial records, I would have proof. But how could a teacher like me reach my son's bank? The question lingered, but at least now I had a path. That night, I sat by Linda's photo. I whispered, "Linda, you taught me to believe in what's right. I cannot let Michael turn me into a demon in their eyes. I must see this through." Outside, Springfield still buzzed with malicious rumors, Michael's post spreading everywhere. But inside me, determination flared. I would follow Trevor Miller's trail into darkness. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I had never imagined setting foot in a place like this. A teacher used to chalk dust in libraries, now sitting in a grimy bar waiting for a poison dealer. Springfield's night was freezing, but inside the Rusty Nail, the air was thick with cheap liquor, cigarette smoke, and the hoarse laughter of men broken by life. I sat in the shadows, clutching a glass of soda, eyes on the door. Near midnight, Trevor Miller appeared, still in, the same worn jacket, the same bearded face, eyes darting like a fox. He sat, ordered beer, and within minutes, men came, quick exchanges of packets for cash. My heart pounded, but I knew this was the man I had to face. When the bar thinned, I approached. His gaze was half mocking, half wary. "Who are you? A schoolteacher? Lost your way?" I drew a breath, summoning courage. "I know you met Michael Dalton. I want to talk about $12,000. The name froze him. He raised a brow, then barked a laugh. "So you're the old man? Never thought father and son would turn this bitter." He started to leave, but I blocked him. "What did you sell my son? White snake root? A poison formula?" My words made him pause, then he leaned close, breath stinking of beer. "Old man, I don't know where you got this, but yes, if someone pays, there's product. $12,000, clean. I don't care what he did with it. I sell, I don't kill." My body shook, but I forced calm. "Do you have proof? A receipt, a transfer, anything showing Michael paid?" Trevor laughed. "You think I'm stupid. I don't keep records for cops. But banks don't hide. Ask First National Bank if they saw a fat transfer last week. I don't need to lie." He leaned back, cackling, treating me as amusement. I walked out, heart pounding, fear or hope, I could not tell. Trevor had given no evidence, but his words, heard by others in the bar, were a lead. If I found the transfer, I could turn it all around. Springfield might suspect. Rosa might accuse. Michael might post endless lies, but money does not lie. Driving home, the night wind whipped cold through the window. My back shivered. Trevor was not the kind to let questions slide. An old teacher probing about $12,000 in poison would make him cautious. I might have put myself in danger, but without risk, I would drown in rumor. At home, I wrote down every word of our meeting. Time, place, Trevor's lines. I folded it carefully and hid it in my desk. The lamplight glowed over the poison vial and Linda's photo. I looked into her gentle eyes and whispered, "Linda, give me strength. I will not fall." Outside, Springfield still roared with rumors, Michael's post spreading with knives in every comment. But now I had a spark of hope. Trevor's careless admission and the trail of money at the bank. I knew the road ahead would be perilous, but as a teacher who once told students, "Every problem has a solution," I could not give up. Springfield's night stretched long, but in my heart, a new flame had been lit, the flame of truth. I once thought the harshness of public opinion was the worst it could get, but I was wrong. That Monday, as I sat in the living room, I received a thick envelope stamped by the Greene County Court. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a summons along with a petition filed by Michael. I read each line as my heart tightened. Petitioner, Michael Dalton. Subject, request for the court to appoint me as the legal guardian of my father, Thomas Dalton, because he has shown signs of losing behavioral control, engaging in dangerous actions that resulted in the poisoning of Mr. Henry Carson. I was stunned. The very son I had raised, taught, and sacrificed my life for was now formally asking the court to strip away my autonomy, my rights to manage property, treating me no different from a madman. In the petition, Michael laid out the very lies he had sown online. My father often quarreled bitterly with Henry Carson about land disputes, and even told me directly he would never forgive him. In recent years, he has lost control, sometimes forgetful, sometimes angry without reason. As a biology teacher, he knows toxic substances well, and it is hard to deny that such knowledge could become a tool for revenge. I fear he is no longer capable of managing his assets or behavior. For the safety of the community and to protect him, I ask the court to appoint me as guardian. Reading those words, I felt my blood rush hot to my face. Every phrase was carefully crafted, mentioning land to suggest motive, loss of control to justify taking over assets, and twisting my profession as a biology teacher into proof of guilt. For years, biology has allowed me to save students, to explain the mysteries of nature, and to inspire a generation. Now, in my son's hands, it had become a knife turned against me. News spread quickly. Springfield had already murmured about me. With court papers, they treated it as evidence. Passing the farmer's market, I overheard a woman sigh. Poor Michael, with a father so bitter and unstable, a biology teacher using his knowledge to harm. I clenched my teeth, stomach twisted. They pitied him, and I became the villain. At Springfield High, colleagues avoided me altogether. The principal sent a curt email. "Mr. Dalton, due to public pressure, we must extend your suspension until the matter is resolved." I sat before the screen, remembering countless hours on the podium, the shining eyes of students as I taught the cycle of life, and felt bitter beyond words. A few former students texted, "Teacher, I don't believe what they say, but it's hard." That word "but" was the deepest knife. I knew truth no longer stood with me, at least not in the eyes of the community. I had only one path left, to gather evidence myself. That night, I sat in the living room, the desk lamp shining on the glass vial of white powder I had kept. I recalled my meeting with Trevor Miller, his mocking smile when mentioning $12,000, Eric's confirmation that Michael had bragged, "Now my father is no longer a problem." These fragments were no longer imagination. They were facts, waiting to be assembled. As a biology teacher, I knew, in science, data is undeniable. In law, too. Springfield was silent that night, wind whistling across the roof. I sat at my desk and wrote a plan. 1. Find a way to pressure Trevor into giving more proof, a recording, a witness. 2. Trace the transfer at First National Bank. Confirm the $12,000. 3. Prepare for court, where I would face not only Michael and Rosa, but an entire Springfield hungry for blood. I was like prey cornered, but I knew if I did not fight, I would lose everything. Honor, property, career, even the soul Linda had left me. I looked at her photo on the shelf. "Linda," I whispered, "you once said the most important lesson is courage. Now it is my turn." I inhaled deeply, fists clenched. Outside, Springfield already saw me as guilty. But in the dark, I knew. The real battle was only beginning. And this time, I would not only defend myself, but also the honor of a teacher of biology, the only legacy I had left. On the day of the hearing, Springfield erupted. The whole town crowded into the Greene County Courthouse, filling the stone steps, some clutching newspapers, others raising phones to record me. I climbed the stairs, legs heavy as lead. I had spent my life in classrooms, with chalkboards, but now stood as a defendant. Inside, white lights glared down, the benches packed, Springfield's eyes fixed on me as if I were a rare animal. Michael sat at the petitioner's side, suit immaculate, face solemn, but in his eyes glinted something icy that chilled me. Beside him was Rosa Carson, gaunt, eyes red, but her voice steady as she spoke. "Your Honor, my husband still lies in a coma. Henry drank the poisoned liquor brought by Thomas Dalton. He was bitter over land. He spoke words of resentment. I believe Henry is the victim of that hatred." Whispers burst through the courtroom. A neighbor stood, voice sharp. I heard Thomas say Henry stole his land. He shouted at the town meeting last year. Now Henry collapses from his liquor. No surprise. The prosecutor seized the moment. "Your Honor, Mr. Dalton is a biology teacher. He not only had a motive, but the knowledge to use a rare poison like white snake root. That cannot be a coincidence. Each word struck like knives. A lifetime of teaching knowledge, now turned into a noose." Then Michael rose, voice quivering like a sorrowful son. "Your Honor, I am his son. It pains me to say this, but I have heard my father repeat his bitterness toward Henry Carson. He loses control, sometimes forgetful, sometimes angry without cause. I fear for his safety and for the community. Therefore, I must request to be appointed guardian, to protect him from himself." He bowed his head, face drowning in sorrow, drawing the courtroom's sympathy. Eyes fell on me, filled with doubt and disdain. Behind me, I heard a whisper, "If even the sun says so, what is there left to argue?" I rose, hands trembling but voice steady. "Your Honor, I am Thomas Dalton, a biology teacher at Springfield High. My life has been spent teaching right from wrong, teaching that science is light against darkness. I have never wanted to harm anyone, least of all Henry, a neighbor who once helped repair my roof. But that bottle was not mine. It was sent by Michael as a birthday gift. When I gave it to Henry, I did not know it contained poison. But when I realized, I kept a vial. Here, Your Honor." From my pocket, I placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was the remnant of the white powder I had saved from the package. Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor scowled, and Michael's face faltered. I continued. "I brought this sample to my former colleague, Mr. Gary McConnell, a chemistry teacher. He confirmed it was white snakeroot toxin, and more than that, I have a witness. Eric, Michael's former classmate, can testify that Michael dealt with a man named Trevor Miller, paying $12,000 for the formula and dosage of the poison. I personally confronted Trevor. He told me himself that the money was transferred at First National Bank. Your Honor, if you examine the financial records, the truth will be clear." The courtroom fell into dead silence. Every eye turned toward Michael. He smirked faintly, trying to regain composure. "My father, he's lost his mind. He's fabricating stories, blaming me to escape guilt." But his voice quivered, no longer smooth. I stared into his eyes, firm. If I've lost my mind, how do I remember every number, every name? If I'm lying, then why is this vial of poison in this envelope? The judge struck the gavel for order. Public opinion was split in the room. Some whispered, "If there really is $12,000, then everything changes." Others nodded, "But he's a biology teacher. Who knows if he staged it himself?" My chest heaved, but inside me a spark of hope lit. For the first time after days of being buried, the tide of opinion was no longer one-sided. For the first time, cracks appeared in the wall Michael had built. When the court adjourned for further investigation, I sat back down, heart heavy as stone. But my eyes shone brighter than ever. I knew the battle was long, but I also knew the truth had begun to speak. And I, a biology teacher, turned into a demon, now had a chance to reclaim my honor. The Greene County Courthouse was packed again Thursday morning. Rumors swept Springfield. Today would reveal everything, the day to decide Thomas Dalton's fate. I entered, legs like lead. Springfield's eyes burned into me, half curious, half contemptuous. Michael sat at the petitioner's table, face cold, suit sharp, hands folded like a successful businessman. I looked at him, my heart breaking. Never had I imagined that the boy I once held in my arms, taught to throw a ball at Nathaniel Greene Park, would one day drag his father to court, determined to bury his honor and life. The prosecutor opened firmly. Your Honor, we investigated Mr. Dalton's claims from the last session. Results show they are baseless. My fists clenched, heart pounding. He laid it out. First, the whiskey bottle. In the gift box was only the phrase, "Happy Birthday," no sender's name. Fingerprints showed only Thomas Dalton's and Henry Carson's, no trace of Michael Dalton. The delivery came from an intermediary address, untraceable. Conclusion, no proof Michael sent the bottle. Whispers rose. My heart sank. The prosecutor pressed on. Second, the $12,000 Mr. Dalton claims Michael paid Trevor Miller. We contacted First National Bank. Result, no transfer of $12,000 from Michael Dalton's account in the relevant period. No record exists. My world dropped beneath me, but worse was yet to come. Third, Trevor Miller. When authorities searched records, no such identity existed. No social security number, no bank account, no residence registration. That name is a phantom, perhaps invented by Mr. Dalton to shift blame. The courtroom erupted, nods all around. I told you, he made it all up. Even the dealer doesn't exist. Scornful eyes, mocking laughs pierced me like needles. I slumped, drenched in cold sweat. In that instant, Michael's entire plan became clear. He had used cash to erase bank trails, created a phantom dealer so I would think I found a lead, lured me to present Trevor as proof, then destroyed me by proving no trace existed. My life-teaching logic, teaching evidence, has now turned against me. I sagged in my chair, sweat soaking. Under hundreds of stares, I was no longer a respected teacher, but a delusional old man inventing stories. -9, I thought. Never had my life felt so dark. I half heard the prosecutor thunder, Your Honor, clearly Mr. Dalton suffers from cognitive decline. He fabricated witnesses, invented money, and imagined someone called Trevor Miller. We request the court formally declare him incompetent, granting guardianship to Michael Dalton. Scattered claps broke out, stabbing me. The judge raised the gavel, preparing to rule. I closed my eyes, surrendering. A lifetime of teaching words, ending as a liar at the hands of my own son. I thought of Linda, of the classroom years, and wondered, was this the end? At that moment, the courtroom doors burst open. All turned. A figure rushed in, breathless but resolute. It was Emily, Michael's wife. Her body shook, but her voice rang clear. Your Honor, I request to testify. The room roared, and the judge struck the gavel for order. Emily took the stand, staring directly at Michael. Michael did not only want guardianship. He planned to poison his father, Mr. Thomas, with liquor laced with toxin. Because of his heart condition, just enough would look like natural cardiac failure. But the plan failed, because the bottle went to my father, Henry Carson. When the poisoning failed, he spread rumors, painting his own father as unstable, as the one who poisoned his in-law. He tried to turn a teacher of integrity into a monster, to hide his crime and seize the estate. And Your Honor, her voice cracked, tears spilling. The victim lying comatose, Henry Carson, is not only Mr. Thomas's neighbor, but my own father. I cannot stand by while both my father and my father-in-law are destroyed by him. I want the truth revealed. The courtroom gasped. Michael went pale, lips moving without words. The judge frowned, ordering police to secure Emily's evidence. A warrant was issued immediately to search Michael's home. When officers arrived, they found a locked room, hiding things he had never meant to be seen. I lifted my head, still heavy, but in that moment, for the first time, I felt a ray of light pierce the darkness. The battle was not over, but truth had begun to find its voice. The search warrant was issued immediately after Emily's testimony. Springfield had never seen a trial this tense. Police rushed to Michael's home in full view of the community and reporters. I sat in the courtroom, fingers interlocked, heart pounding. For years teaching biology, I told my students, truth never disappears, it only waits for the moment to be seen. Today I prayed for that moment. When the police returned, they carried sealed boxes. One by one, the evidence was laid out. First was a leather notebook, scribbled in a familiar hand. The judge ordered it, read aloud. An officer's voice rang. Dosage of white snake root. Dissolve in liquor. The heart will falter. With pre-existing heart condition, it will be ruled myocardial infarction. The courtroom froze. I closed my eyes, remembering the lessons I once taught about poisonous plants, never imagining such knowledge would become a weapon in my son's hands. Next, a small wooden box was opened. Inside were plastic bags of white powder, sealed, labeled with dates. The officer confirmed. Preliminary tests, white snake root. Murmurs swelled like waves. A man whispered, "My God, the teacher told the truth." I lifted my head, throat tight. After days of being cornered, truth was finally breaking through. But the crushing blow came from a USB found in Michael's desk. It was evidence Emily had secretly recorded while watching him. Too fearful and angry to reveal until now, police discovered it in the search and brought it forward. On the screen, Michael's voice played coldly. "As long as my father drinks it, with his heart condition, no one will doubt. If the bottle ends up with Henry Carson, even better, I can pin it all on the old man." My body shook. Emily wept below. Rosa Carson broke into sobs, but when her eyes turned to me, the hatred was gone, replaced by regret for believing lies. The judge looked straight at Michael, stern. "Mr. Dalton, what explanation do you have for this evidence?" Michael's face drained, sweat dripping, lips moving without words. The public in the courtroom, once against me, now turned furious at him. Those who once called me the poisoner whispered, "The teacher is innocent. The son is the real demon." The session ended with an order to detain Michael pending criminal trial. I was declared innocent, my legal capacity restored, and above all, my honor returned. Stepping out of court, Springfield, for the first time in months, no longer looked at me with contempt, but with quiet remorse and respect. A former student approached, voice trembling. "Teacher, I'm sorry for ever doubting you." I placed a hand on his shoulder, my heart lighter than it had been in years. In the days that followed, Henry Carson received careful treatment and slowly recovered. When he awoke, his hoarse voice but clear eyes told me, "Thomas, I knew you would never harm me." We clasped hands. Two men once divided by suspicion, now reunited by truth. Emily stood beside us, tears streaming, but they were tears of relief. The Springfield community, once cruel and swayed by rumor, now gathered at the high school. I was invited on stage, not to defend myself, but to receive an apology. The principal said, "We judged too quickly. Today we welcome back Mr. Thomas Dalton, who devoted his life to his students." Applause thundered louder than at any graduation. I stood there looking at former students, colleagues, neighbors, realizing honor is not easily regained, but when it returns, it shines brighter than ever. I no longer hated Michael. I only felt sorrow for the son I had raised with all my love, who destroyed himself. But I knew life must go on. Springfield would talk, but I would live, not in the shadow of suspicion, but in the light of truth. That night I sat on the porch, Ozark wines carrying the scent of hay. I poured hot tea instead of whiskey, gazing at the starry sky. In the photo beside me, Linda still smiled. I whispered, "Linda, do you see? Truth has come out. I am still the teacher, still Thomas, the man you believed in." And for the first time in months, I felt peace. The next trial was no longer mine, but Michael's. Weeks later, Greene County prosecutors filed charges: first-degree attempted murder, deliberate use of poison, and fraud in seeking guardianship to seize assets. His lawyer argued it was a mistake made in desperation, but the evidence was overwhelming, from the notebook of formulas, the bags of white snake root, to the cold recording. The jury swiftly agreed. The judge sentenced Michael Dalton to 25 years for attempted murder, plus 10 years for unlawful use of poison. The combined 35 years carried no parole for the first 20. When the gavel struck, I closed my eyes, not with triumph, but with unspeakable grief. The son I once cradled was now led away to a cold cell, and I was alive to witness it. The court restored my honor and gave Springfield a bitter lesson. Truth may be buried by rumor and lies, but the law will uncover it. Michael was led away, head bowed, while I stood silent. I knew my life would bear this scar forever, but at least justice had prevailed. The story of Thomas Dalton ends here, but there are countless others of betrayal, justice, and honor that I will share with you. Before you go, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Your support will be the greatest encouragement for me to bring more powerful stories. Thank you sincerely.